Welcome to the Chelsea Physic Garden podcast, the podcast about people, plants and place. Hi Ned.
Hi Jess.
So this episode will be looking at a plant whose popularity is on the rise, but I'm going to warn you, it won't be an easy guess. So I'm going to give you a clue because I'm such a nice person. I'm going to give you the Latin name, all right? And the Latin name is Malvaceae.
I mean, jumping to a kind of assumption about me because I've got a posh voice, I understand Latin. Sadly, unlike some people who claim to understand Latin, all of my intellect is in English. And so, I don't know, bit Harry Potter, mandrake?
No, and I'm not even sure they exist. Okay, we can go down another. What about the Rose of Sharon or Rose Mallow?
Ooh, that sounds quite Irish in a way.
Well, Mallow is a place in Cork.
I love the force at which you said that. I'm afraid, though, all of that loud noise and bumbling is just a way of distracting from the fact I still don't know the answer.
Okay, Hugh Grant, it is indeed Hibiscus.
Brilliant.
Where I'm going to look at it is imagery, herbal use, medicine, symbolism, all that holistic side to the beautiful hibiscus.
I think we should follow up with a couple of interviews, partly because I want to use this as an excuse to talk to a few food writers I really want to talk to.
Why not? I'm going to go back to the old Belvoir Farm and see how they use hibiscus, because I think the first time I sort of saw it on supermarket shelves was a beaver drink. So I'm going to check it out, see what they got for me.
Well, Jess, I'll see you back in the studio. Jess, did you come across hibiscus knowingly much before this episode?
Well, as ever, research often highlights one's own ignorance. And I, in my head, if someone had asked me, puzzle or whatever, what's the name of the flower traditionally worn in hair in Hawaii or Tahiti, I would have said lotus, and I would have been wrong.
Lotus, broad.
Very, very, very broad.
Because of course it is.
The hibiscus flower.
I like the way I said because of course it is the hibiscus flower. I didn't have any knowledge of it. That's just a classic man thing to do. Because of course we all know that's a hibiscus flower. Absolutely no idea until you started that sentence. That is very interesting. And now I picture it. I'm like, yes, that is exactly that very wide, open, supple flower with almost this tongue coming out of it.
They've lots of different expressions. They can be trumpet shaped, they can be dinner plate shaped, they can be funnel shaped. And it is a lot of cultural meanings and uses, as you can imagine. That species that we think of, that we associate with coming off the plane and getting the lei around your neck and all that, that is Hibiscus brackenridgei, a yellow species endemic to the islands, and it is the state flower of Hawaii. Its bark is used to make cords to secure outrigger canoes, create sandal straps, used for sewing clothing. So kind of a bit like hemp in that way, Medicinal uses come up again for stomach ailments, and hibiscus wood was used to create charcoal for cooking and heating. So I wonder what something made with hibiscus wood would taste like. Sounds incredible. That's the thing. This incredible plant. I mean, I know it's a genus, but it's still extraordinary that
so much
can lower your blood pressure and you can make a boat with it.
Yeah.
So I mean, obviously they're ornamental, but depending on which ear they're tucked behind indicates your availability for a romantic relationship.
Really?
Yeah.
So it's like I remember at uni traffic light parties.
This is I think a much classier. Well, a more elegant way, perhaps, of advertising your availability.
Well, don't exoticize it. It might be just in Hawaii. They might be just as interested as you have a blue WKD. Generally, it means you're available.
It is so long since I've had a WKD. I'm very happy to say. But definitely one of the best nights in Cork I had was with my sister Claire, and we made a decision to only drink WKD, and then we never drank it again. That's how good a night it was. But if we could also look at hibiscus flowers in Greek mythology as well, because, and I mean, again, you wouldn't look at these cultural residences in Hawaii, but the story of attraction between the god Adonis and the goddess Aphrodite is tied up in the hibiscus blossom.
Really?
Yes, in some stories, Adonis turns into a hibiscus flower to stop Aphrodite from arguing with the goddess Persephone. And in other variations, Aphrodite turns into an anemone flower, and he's then reborn as, you know, your Channing Tatum, your Hemsworth, you know, insert as is relevant. What I didn't realise as well is like this family of flowers, or genus of flowers, to use the correct term, encompasses so many different types.
I know, and that makes researching the history, the trade history, the social history of it slightly difficult, because where do I start and where do I end?
Which one are we talking about?
Which one are we talking about? And I have gone for one that I know better than any of the others, a particular type that is intrinsic in the food and culture of the kind of West African diaspora, specifically the kind of transatlantic West African diaspora. And that is what is known in the Caribbean as sorrel.
Sorrel.
Now, of course, sorrel in Europe is a very kind of savoury herb, which is used traditionally in Polish cooking particularly. It's used a bit in British. It's kind of fallen out of fashion in British and French. And it has a very small red flower, which is presumably why this hibiscus sorrel that was transported from West Africa to the Americas during the period of the slave trade was called sorrel, in that way that lazy people would give things vague names that correlated, even though it is very much a tropical plant. It is not a plant that flourishes or originates outside the tropics.
What makes me wonder if the girl's name sorrel, which you tend not to find outside of Noel Coward plays, refers to the herb or to the flower.
Yeah. Sorrel's a great name.
It's such a great name, because actually I can think of the exact Noel Coward play. It's called Hay Fever, appropriately enough, considering what we're dealing with. And it concerns the wonderful bohemian, overdramatic family, the Blisses, who are just hilarious in this play. And the daughter is called Sorrel. And it couldn't suit her better, because she's just a little 1920s, just stroppy little madam. Sorrel. Well, I'm strapping in, Ned, and I'm ready for my lesson.
So, hibiscus sorrel is thought to originate in West Africa. Not entirely clear exactly where, but in West Africa it's found wild. But in West Africa, it is the flower and the bud which is used as a flavouring and is used generally as making a drink. And it has a really distinctive sour taste. It also imparts red colour. And this red colour is kind of symbolic importance to various foodstuffs found in West Africa. So the kola nut, which is a kind of constituent ingredient of Coca-Cola. And if you read any of Chinua Achebe, if you read Things Fall Apart, which is kind of a great piece of Nigerian literature, they chew kola nuts. It's a great sign of welcoming. The red rice is important, jollof rice, palm oil, real palm oil, not
the kind of the sort of filler oil that we
not the stuff that Nutella's 3/4 made from.
Which is sort of like almost like a waste product almost. That's
exactly
repurposed to use instead of more expensive and healthier ingredients.
Palm oil in West Africa is quite a distinctive red oil with, I mean, it's kind of, it produces this incredible flavour. I've only had got into West African food quite recently, but it produces this incredible flavour, almost like it's not even comparable to any other oils. I mean, the closest I could think is maybe if you were using an incredibly strong olive oil in something, but its flavour profile is completely unique. And generally, there are these red plants and these red ingredients which come up again and again in West African food, and particularly when it comes to sorrel and sorrel tea and hibiscus tea.
Well, yes, because apparently the flavour of the tea is quite similar to that of cranberry juice.
Yes.
And it's got a ton of medicinal purposes as well.
Does it? Well, everything, like in the Chelsea Physic Garden, anything almost always has a medicinal purpose.
And then also it always has contraindications as well. That's what's so fascinating about these plants. They're depending on the dosage, they can cure you, or they can be, like you're not recommended to have hibiscus when you're pregnant.
Really?
Yes, even though I don't think it's ever been proven to be detrimental in humans, but they did observe it could work as an abortifant in rats.
Oh my God.
So they're like, look, probably wouldn't do anything to a human. Why take that chance?
Yeah.
And I think it's not hard to avoid. It's not like, I don't have pregnant friends who say, for example, want their eggs runny and lament that they can't have their runny eggs or can't have their blue cheese with their wine. People aren't going, I'm just craving hibiscus.
I like the way you said blue cheese with wine, which is probably another thing.
They should probably not have the wine. I mean, you're allowed a glass. Mate, I've got Irish friends. Come on now.
Yeah.
So, no, I shouldn't propagate that stereotype. So that's the thing. I mean, again, you'd wonder how much it is placebo effect, but apparently it can speed up wound healing, and it was also used to treat lice.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Now, this is where the story gets very depressing, because it is hugely important in Caribbean and Black American and Black Brazilian food across the kind of Americas, where there is a Black population. It is of importance to the extent where they think Kool-Aid, that distinctive red drink, is a kind of spiritual descendant of hibiscus.
Gosh.
So it came over. It doesn't exist in the Americas naturally. It was brought over by transported slaves. And if you look at the things that brought over by transported slaves, they were things which are really, really crucial in this mix of kind of spiritualism and food. So as I said, the cola nut, Coca-Cola, again, another descendant. Rice came over as well. Okra. Now, what I didn't understand when I was looking into this is how, when they were stripped of everything, how they would have the ability, the physical ability to transport and the wherewithal to think ahead, to transport whatever they could, whatever was of importance, these seeds and nuts. If they had nowhere to carry it, they had no belongings. And one of the theories I found is that it was put into braids in hair. Yeah, that these seeds and these nuts and these ways of propagating their culture, keeping their culture, their culinary culture, their spiritual culture alive, was done by hiding it in their hair.
That's extraordinary.
Isn't it?
That
amazing.
Mind-blowing.
And there are other ways. There are some people who would have brought things over in more conventional ways. But yeah, this is something that they wouldn't have known where they were going. They wouldn't have had any comprehension, because how could you, that they would be sailing across the Atlantic to, in inverted commas, the New World. Mm-hmm. And yet these things that they're important, they found a way of bringing across to Jamaica, to Trinidad, to Brazil, to its existence in the Americas is as a result of...
Well, their ingenuity.
Their ingenuity. We have very, very, very few written accounts of anyone who was a slave in this period. And yet the culture flourishes anyway. Society flourishes anyway. A lot of what we can learn about the way people lived their lives during this period and what their culture was comes down through food, because that is something that you can draw a line down. You can say, well, this is how hibiscus got here. This is how hibiscus became important in the Caribbean, in America, in Brazil. Given I've been talking so much about an ingredient that is so important amongst the Afro-Caribbean diaspora, I've got in contact with two amazing people involved in the food of those communities. First up is Edwina Morgan, a British Ghanaian chef and founder of Wakie Leaf, a catering company that also does Ghanaian dining experiences, pop-ups, cooking classes, you name it. And then I'll be talking to an amazing food writer and chef, Riaz Phillips. Riaz has written two brilliant cookbooks, and the reason I kind of hesitate before cookbooks is they're also kind of works of sociology and travel and history about Caribbean food. One, Belly Full, is about Caribbean food in the UK, and the other, West Winds, is about Caribbean food in the Caribbean. And spoiler alert, I've done quite a lot of my research from reading that book. Edwina, what does hibiscus remind you of? What does it evoke when you think of it?
Oh wow. Hibiscus is sort of quite important, especially in my family. It reminds me a lot of my grandmother. So I grew up sort of probably the first 5 years or so I spent with my grandmother in Ghana, and I remember her sort of cooking lots of herbs, different herbs. So we lived and I'm just sort of going to try and get you to imagine sort of living in a really nice, sort of lovely small house, sort of surrounded by different plants. All of them had various uses and various purposes. My grandmother would often sort of wake up in the morning and then go into she called it her garden, go in there and come back with lots of leaves and herbs and flowers, and then would cook them to make tea for us in the morning, even before we had the normal tea as we know it, which is the English breakfast tea. And one of the things that she'd often get would be hibiscus. And I was always drawn to it because of the colour. So the hibiscus, I think there are various varieties of the hibiscus plants, but the one that I remember from my grandmother actually is really red hibiscus, lovely tropical flower that sort of she brings in. And when she brings it, she dries it by her coal pot in the kitchen just to get it a bit dried and intensify the flavors. And I just remember this so well. Every time I see hibiscus plants, dried hibiscus or even fresh hibiscus flowers, I'm always immediately transported to my grandmother's kitchen, where she sort of just walked in from her garden with all these bouquet of flowers and different plants with various sort of medicinal uses and purposes. So yeah, that's what hibiscus reminds me of.
That's amazing. When did you learn to make the tea yourself?
Oh, I think it was very early on. I was very. My grandma, bless her soul, has passed on now, but I was attached to my grandmother's hip. Literally everywhere she went, I was with her. And I think just through osmosis, just sitting next to her, I kind of learned how to do it. So when she was unwell, I think around 9, just before I returned to the UK to my mum, she fell ill, and I remember having to make the tea for her. So I'd often go in, and it's without anyone teaching me, I'd go into her garden and I'd find the various sort of plants. So she'd have dandelion, she'd have different types of sort of plants. Some of them I don't know the English name for, but I'll recognize them when I go to sort of botanical gardens and things. I'll always remember this as, oh, this is what my grandma used, but I don't know what it's called in English. But I remember making the tea for her. And I think that's when I realized, oh my God, I can actually make this. So when I came back to the UK to my mum, I kind of just carried on with that tradition, making hibiscus tea for her and making other sort of forms of herbal drinks for her as well.
What goes into a traditional hibiscus tea?
The traditional hibiscus tea has lots of other herbs with it and other sort of I'll probably say other sort of herbs and spices with it. So you'd often have clove, and clove is obviously very, very important in West African cuisine. So cloves and ginger. So to make the tea, obviously you get the fresh flowers and you dry it for a few days, just almost to intensify the flavor and the color. So the hibiscus plant is actually naturally quite tart. So you'd often need a bit of sugar or something to go with it, sugar or honey to go with it. So you'd have the dried hibiscus, you boil that with some cloves and some ginger to bring a bit of oomph to it. And obviously, ginger is also known to have some herbal sort of properties as well. So when you cook all of that together, add a bit of honey to it, it just sort of creates a really lovely tart but sweet and very sort of almost medicinal tasting tea, which is just really good for the soul, I think. So that's what goes into it. It's quite simple, but then the first taste of really warm hibiscus tea is just really lovely and quite sort of calming.
In your catering and pop-up events, do you always bring a hibiscus tea, a hibiscus drink, something flavoured with hibiscus with you?
I do. So the philosophy behind my cooking or the reason why I cook is a very popular concept in Ghana called Sankofa. And Sankofa basically just means going back to pick up sort of what you've left behind and then bringing it to the present. So it's, in my interpretation, is sort of going back to my grandmother's recipes and then bringing what she taught me back to the present to sort of apply it to my life as it is now. I'm essentially sort of second generation sort of Ghanaian living in the UK, and I have children, and I feel like there's some sort of pressure on me to pass on that knowledge that my grandmother shared with me with my children. So my children and my friends as well. So every time I sort of have a supper club, I bring an element of my grandmother or her cooking with me, and that for me sort of means bringing some form of hibiscus drink or interpretation into my cooking. So I'd often so for my Christmas supper clubs, I'd often make mulled hibiscus drinks, which reminds me of the tea that my grandmother would make in the morning. So you would think mulled wine, but you'd have a mulled hibiscus sort of drink as the sort of the non-alcoholic version of mulled wine that you'd serve. But it's the flavor profiles are often sort of quite similar.
It sounds like you've got a very personal relationship with hibiscus, but do you get a sense it's something that a lot of people in the Afro-Caribbean community have a kind of shared personal relationship with? So everyone will have a kind of personal relationship with this ingredient.
So I think that just the whole idea of food in just Black culture or even African culture, for example, is built on experiences and identity. So we often, and I don't think I'm alone in thinking this, but I think we often experience food with different sort of points or memories in our lives. It's just sort of, it just happens that most parties that you go to would often have sobolo or zobo, which is the hibiscus drink So you'd often form associations with sort of family gatherings or certain significant times in your life with different foods or drinks. So I'm not surprised that it probably has some personal resonance with other people as well, because people remember specific aunties or weddings or places where they went and they had the best sobolo drink or the best zobo drink, that sort of thing. So there's always some sort of connection with food or drink and a memory, especially in sort of African food or I guess Black food culture as a whole. So there's always a connection. We don't just eat for the sake of it. You always sort of have a memory that's attached to the food, the drink, the ingredient, and that you carry with you.
Riaz, you were born and grew up in London. What did an ingredient like hibiscus sorrel mean to you growing up?
I guess it was just one of those things that kind of reared its head every year ever since birth. So it was always something that was commonplace, something you knew of. It's not something that you ever second guessed or thought twice about.
Yeah.
It was just the same as, like a Christmas ham or a turkey. It's something that it was talked about every year. So it just became part of your life.
Always at Christmas?
Yeah, it was especially at Christmas. I think it's that's the time of year that it tends to grow and rear. And as a result of that, I think that's why it became sort of this kind of December-y, wintry Christmas type.
Is there like a distinctive smell around? Like, did your parents make it, or did your family make it themselves, or is it something you went out and bought?
It can be a bit of both. Sometimes I think if your family is a bit more pressed, they might buy the kind of cordial version, but more
Yeah.
often than not, it is something that is quite relatively straightforward to make when you have the dried leaves. And so for the better part, and also you can get a bigger yield when you buy the leaves yourself, and you can make a few bottles to give to your uncles and your grandparents and your friends and stuff like that.
Where did you get the leaves growing up?
As far as my family, as far as I know, that they could have always been able to find them at your markets, your local markets, especially
Yeah.
places like Ridley Road Market near where we grew up in Dalston, in Hackney, or Electric Avenue down in Brixton, East Street, in Elephant and Castle. These kind of markets, they've always been available, especially kind of dried fruits and plants. So those are the things that have actually always been really easy to find. And now, more recently, you can find them at your big Sainsbury's, Waitrose supermarket type places.
When you were kind of doing your research about food within the Caribbean itself, and when you went to the Caribbean, is there a different significance, or is it pretty similar in the kind of it's a Christmas drink, people don't think too much about it, it's just tradition, it's just something that comes up every year?
I think the actual difference between when you're actually in the Caribbean is that it's more of a part of your life because it's literally growing. Like it will be growing in your gardens or your front porch, or it will be used for. There's I mean, I say the drink is mostly used at Christmas, but I think definitely it's something that can be consumed the year round, and it is something that is grown and used. A lot of for its red coloring can be used in a lot of different other foodstuffs as well. So I think that main difference is that it's something for us that's a bit removed. Like I was recently in Trinidad, and they had it grown in their front garden in the middle of. I'm not sure if it's the type of yield that comes at the end of the year where it's really plentiful, and as a result of that, or if there's some kind of deeper tradition involved in that. I think that idea of warm drinks with herbs and spices is something that just seems to be very much associated with Christmas time.
Is it always served warm then?
Oh no, it's definitely not something that's always served hot. But I think just as a way of that's how it's been made. Is you've got to boil down the plants first, and I think that association of boiling fruits, I think that's definitely something that is kind of a wintertime activity.
Yeah. Is there a sense that there's a connection point between the Black diaspora, between Africa, or anything, or is it kind of a coincidence?
It's definitely not a coincidence. I mean, I think it found its way in volume to the Caribbean because of the West Africans and the West Africans who were on those voyages as a result of the transatlantic slave trade. But what I think is really interesting is that there's this kind of unspoken connection where a lot of people are consuming it in high volumes in pockets and not realizing that people in different places are also consuming it. And I think that's a result of the many different names it has where it's drunk. I think it's called Bissap in certain parts of West Africa, Di Bellini, Sabolo, I think it's called in Ghana. I even remember finding out in parts of Latin America they call it water of Jamaica, like agua de Jamaica. And I think it's like there hasn't been this kind of conference where everyone's got together and said, hey, we drink this as well. And as a result, I think that is kind of separated all of these different peoples around the world from not knowing that they're kind of really consuming and been lifelong fans of the same thing.
And it's back to Belvoir Farms for me, and we're going to have a good old chat about hibiscus because it's emerging as one of the key flavours in their drinks. So looking across your range of products, there's a lot of flavours here that will be very familiar and recognisable to lots of people, like raspberry, citrus, lemon, mint, ginger, but then there's hibiscus. That kind of stands out to me. Can you tell me how it came to be at Belvoir Farms and the kind of processes you do with it?
Okay, so hibiscus is a relatively new ingredient for us. And when we started development of our new botanical sodas range, it was really exciting in that we were broadening all of the ingredients and raw materials that we were looking at and to explore. And one of the drinks that we wanted to create was the Floral Fizz. We knew that we wanted our signature elderflower infusion as part of that drink, and we wanted to explore other floral flavours and aromas that complemented that elderflower but added a bit of a sophisticated twist, so that we had a drink that wasn't just elderflower but that had that kind of je ne sais quoi of aroma and flavour that stood it apart from all other elderflower drinks, but really had that lovely aroma and character that sits really well with elderflower, didn't sit on the elderflower but complements the elderflower and adds an extra layer of aroma and flavour. And we came upon hibiscus as part of that big exploration into other ingredients that we wanted to use, because it has a slightly different aromatic aroma and slightly tropical flavour as well that we thought paired really well with the elderflower. And as soon as we combined the two together, it went really well. And we were starting to develop a drink then that had more character, more sophistication, and more layers of aroma and flavour.
And what are the processes like once you get your hands on the hibiscus? Because we can visualize and indeed have been told about like the boiling of this or the reduction of that. But with the hibiscus flower, how does that work?
So the hibiscus that we're using is an extract of the hibiscus petals. That's where all of that kind of lovely aroma and those volatiles come from that we wanted to use within the drink. So we have an extract of hibiscus that we've then added to our other ingredients. And we're playing about all the time with different levels and tweaking different levels of all of the ingredients until we get something that was just quite right.
Is there a real moment of excitement when you realise, hang on guys, this works?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So on paper, something might sound great, and in your mind you might think, oh yeah, that works really well. But you don't really know until you taste it. So literally, as soon as we're kind of making it in the kitchen and you start to get those smells and you're thinking, oh, this is good, we're onto something here. And then once you then put that in the bottle and taste it and then really understand how well it works together, then yeah, it's really a really exciting moment tasting the finished.
Have you had any disasters?
Yeah, loads.
Oh, can you tell us one? Can you tell us one that you were like, nope, never going to happen?
I'm just trying to think. We tried to combine we put too much rose in a drink.
I can imagine that would have been quite perfumey.
And really, it was too much. I mean, we're trying to create something that's like a real experience. It's not one dimensional, but this was just too much. And that helps actually with the whole process in the end, because you know where you don't want to go. We didn't want something that was too up your nose aromatic. We wanted more pared back subtle flavours that worked really well together. So yeah, we moved away from the rose.
I'm not seeing any rose products here.
Yeah, so with that, it's not in the Floral Fizz.
Is there anything in particular that's intriguing you at the moment, like looking ahead?
I think the trends that are coming through at the moment that we're seeing with the consistent trends on citrus and where citrus is going and all of the different varieties and parts of that citrus, because citrus is such a huge category.
It is.
And constantly evolving. And our interpretations of what citrus is, I think, is constantly evolving, which is one of the reasons why we're exploring that bitter orange flavour. So as our tastes are moving away from sickly, sugary, sweet, and we are more interested in kind of more bitter and not tart and sour, but moving slightly away from sweet and sugary and into those more tart and sour kind of areas that are with a bit of bitterness as well. So I think that's really interesting how our tastes seem to be changing, and we're more open to ingredients that have a bit more of a grown-up flavour and character.
So with the hibiscus behind the ears, all of that stuff. Does
Mm-hmm.
the colour mean anything? Is it like the queen, how the queen would dress and stuff?
It's funny you should ask about the colours. In Hinduism,
Mm.
the red hibiscus blossom belongs to the goddess Kali,
Oh,
and
wow.
sometimes may represent her tongue. And that features a lot in that features a lot in art that depicts Kali, particularly from the Bengal region.
Well, because it does have this amazing tongue that kind of lolls out towards you. Is there any culture in which hibiscus is not? Any sort of tropical temperate culture where hibiscus is not important?
I don't believe, because honestly, like, isn't it strange? You can go your whole life without saying hibiscus out loud.
Yeah.
And I've said it 50 times this week because it comes up everywhere.
Yeah.
But it's funny you should ask about the colours.
Ooh.
Because what's your favourite colour, Ned?
My favourite colour is probably red.
Well, unsurprisingly, red, because we think of red roses, we think of romance. So red hibiscus is associated with love and passion and all that fun stuff and romance. So, you know, if you were going to give your sweetheart a hibiscus, red would be
Red
the colour to go to.
I'll go to the hibiscus shop.
There you
and
go. Go to
my hibiscus emporium.
I mean, it's waiting to be done. But you know, if I was going to give you a hibiscus, Ned, and that's not a euphemism, I would give you a pink hibiscus.
I really hope it's not a euphemism now.
And it symbolises friendship and platonic or familial love.
Oh, that's very nice. I
There
think
you
familial
go.
love is accurate. My wife's favourite colour is white, I think. She wore white on our wedding day. And what does that mean?
Well, unsurprisingly, it is associated with purity, but also particularly with women, femininity, innocence, and white blooms are very much associated with beauty. So I'll give you a pink hibiscus, and you give Mrs. Ned.
So how she likes to be referred to. now.
Yeah, Mrs. Ned. Mrs. Ned. I'm sure she loves it.
Nedette.
I'll give Nadette. That could be a good kid's name.
Yeah,
That's kind of cute. We've just
Nadette.
both gone Nadette because it's like Odette, Nadette.
Yeah. But
yeah.
with more of that Ned pizzazz.
Sure, indeed.
When the Queen was still with us, she'd always kind of whack on a flower, and it's like people would be like, well, actually, that flower means that 7 months ago this person wronged them in a very particular way. So it's amazing she's managed to find this flower. I'm like, you're making this stuff up.
Oh, well, I mean, one fact I learned about the Queen in the wake of her passing that I thought was really interesting is that you know how she would be very colour blocked.
Yeah.
Like it would be a green dress, a green handbag, a green coat, green shoes, or purple or yellow. It would be very bold. And she did that on purpose so that she would be very visual and easy to spot from a distance, because she said she wanted everyone to be able to see she wanted everyone to be able to say they saw the Queen.
Oh, amazing.
Isn't that really cool?
That's really
I mean,
cool.
that is
Yeah, that's when you know branding.
but you know what Chelsea Physic Garden should be growing
Along with its weed.
is yellow hibiscus,
Mm.
because they're associated with fortune and good luck.
And a yellow hibiscus to you. Because I think our time is up. And good luck now in thinking of any word other than hibiscus, which might be one of the nicer flower words that I've ever heard.
I didn't even get onto what they do with it in Egypt. You've been listening to the Chelsea Physic Garden podcast and our episode on hibiscus. Thank you so much to Tom Gilliford at the Chelsea Physic Garden, Riaz Phillips and Edwina Morgan, Spiritland Studios, our composer Pierre O'Reilly, and everyone